They say that getting into the movie business is hard, and let me tell you, Maxine here knows all about it, in more ways than one. She wants to be a movie star more than anything in the world, and doesn't care whose balls she has to step on to do it. But Maxine isn't the only killer in Hollywood, and when the secrets of her past start to threaten her future, she's going to do whatever it takes to make sure that they stay buried. We're here to break down the mistakes made, what you should do, and how to beat the movie star killer in Maxine. This woman's biggest dreams are about to turn into her worst nightmare. Arriving on set at a Hollywood studio, aspiring actress Maxine Minx confidently walks in and takes a seat in front of the casting panel. She's auditioning for the lead role in an upcoming horror movie, hoping for a chance to get out of the adult entertainment business and become an official big screen movie star. After finishing up the audition, she leaves feeling like she absolutely nailed it, bragging to the other girls before hopping in her convertible and speeding out of the parking lot to go do her real job. While she's putting on her makeup, her coworker Amber invites Maxine to a party at a house in the Hollywood Hills, but she turns down the offer, saying that she has to work. Back at her apartment, she gets a call from her agent, and he's got some good news. She finally got the part. Excited, she immediately runs downstairs to tell her best friend Leon, who works at a video store on the first floor of her building, and they decide to celebrate with some pizza later that night. Maxine's next stop is a club where she works as a dancer. After her shift, she meets up with her coworker Tabby, who's afraid to walk home alone because there is a serial killer on the loose. While she's grabbing a taxi, she invites Maxine along to that same party in the hills, but she decides to stay in, saying how she has to get a good night's rest before her first day on the set. Walking home, she takes a shortcut through a foggy alleyway, never noticing that there's a man quietly stalking her from a distance. When she reaches the other end, she's surprised to find that the usually open gate has already been padlocked shut. Turning around, that's when she finally notices the man standing in her path, and he pulls a switchblade out of his pocket as he starts walking after her. But that was his biggest mistake. Okay, well, Maxine may not be an official movie star just yet, but at least she's finally got her first stalker. Seriously though, something tells me that this guy isn't looking for an autograph, and Maxine here needs to act fast before her entire career ends up on the cutting room floor, literally. Earlier, her friend mentioned that there's a dangerous criminal on the loose, a real-life serial killer called the Night Stalker who terrorized Los Angeles back in the 1980s. That's why she had the right idea not to be walking around alone, and Maxine here should have been doing the same thing. Using the buddy system makes you a lot more difficult to target than when you're on your own, and it always helps to have a good meat shield nearby if you need to make a quick escape. Since she was only going one block over anyway, I would have taken the long way around instead of cutting through the obvious murder alley. That way she'd be able to stay in well-lit areas with crowds of other people, and in full view of the police, instead of being caught in a place where nobody could see her if she gets in trouble. With that being said, if you're gonna cut through the alley of death, then you should at least take a quick glance over your shoulder to make sure that you aren't being followed. Carrying some self-defense tools never hurts either, and trust me, we'll get back to that idea in just a minute. If we make it out of this alive, then the first thing that Maxine here needs to do is hire a giant security guard to walk around her at all times, like a modern-day kick streamer. Not only would this keep her safe, but it would also make her seem more important, subconsciously priming people to see her as a famous movie star even before she gets her first red carpet premiere. Now, from the way that this guy is acting, this seems like more than just your average robbery, and he's got a knife, which makes fighting back against him incredibly dangerous. This means that we need to be extremely careful about what we choose to do next. If he was looking just to separate her from her V-Bucks, then it would probably be safer to just cooperate for now. But since he's obviously after more than just her money, Maxine is going to have to fight. The first thing that she should do here is start screaming as loud as she can to attract as much attention as possible, which might cause him to run. Then we need to look around the alley and use anything available to us as tools to make our escape. If she moves quickly, she can use the trash cans as a barrier between her and the attacker. The lids could be used as shields or to throw that like Captain America and knock his stupid little hat right off his head. The key is to keep your distance and only get into a direct fight with him if it's absolutely necessary, aiming for weak points like his eyes, fingers, and balls to get him away. If she can stun him, then she can run back out the way that she came and go back to her job where they have a security guard who can deal with this guy. But of course, this is Maxine that we're talking about, and you're about to see why this was a bad idea for Buster here in just a second. Maxine turns back to the gate, desperately trying to get it open, but just when the man gets a little too close, she whips around and pulls out a pistol, telling him to put his hands up. He immediately drops the knife, but he's about to find out that he messed with the wrong actress. Instead of letting him go, Maxine orders the man to take off all of his clothes and makes him do things with the weapon that you'd only see in one of her other movies. When she's done, she forces the creep to lie down on the ground before stomping straight on his nuts with her high-heeled boot, making sure that he'll never mess with anyone ever again. Back at her apartment, Maxine falls asleep watching movies with Leon until she's abruptly woken up by a series of knocks at the front door. Answering it, she's too late to catch the mysterious visitor going down in the elevator, but finds a strange package on the floor that they left behind. It's a VHS tape labeled "For Maxine," and she's surprised to see that it's actually footage from the movie that she and her friends were recording before the massacre back at the farm in Texas. Embarrassed, Maxine locks herself in her bedroom, so Leon decides to head home alone, having no idea that he's being watched by a man in a car from across the street. Meanwhile, at the house in the hills, Amber and Tabby are just finding out that the party was really a death trap all along. Filming them, a group of men go to a bedroom closet where they have the girls tied up and drag Tabby over to a large green door. Suddenly, a man wearing black leather gloves comes out and attacks her, but this is only the first part of his evil plan. In the morning, Maxine heads to an art studio for her first day working on the film. They need to make a mold of her head for the final scene, so her job is to just sit there and wait for it to dry. But while she's left alone with her thoughts, she starts having visions of the old woman from the farm. The more that she starts to panic, the worse that it gets, until she finally crashes down backwards into the floor, clawing away at the wax that's covering her mouth just to get some air. Across town, two LAPD detectives, Williams and Torres, are called to a crime scene at a cemetery, where two bodies were just discovered floating in the duck pond. It's Amber and Tabby, looking like they've been dead for several hours, with demonic symbols burned into both their skin. That makes 2 victims down, with 6 more to go. And the coroner thinks that it might be related to the serial killer case, but the detectives aren't so sure. Frustrated, Maxine goes out to her car for a break, where a worker comes to give her the filming schedule. He mentions that the director wants to meet her later that day, warning her that the woman can be a pretty scary person. As she's getting ready to leave, she notices a mysterious note tucked under her windshield wiper. It's somebody's phone number with a message telling her to call for a good time. But when she unfolds the sheet, she realizes that it's written on her yearbook picture from when she was still in school. Rushing to the phone, she dials the number to find out what this mystery stalker wants, and the man reveals that he knows her real last name. Not only that, but he knows what happened at the farm back in Texas, and tells her to meet him at a restaurant in 1 hour or else. Okay. It looks like somebody found out about Maxine's dirty laundry, and this just made her long-awaited rise to stardom a lot more complicated. She can't make it to the big screen if she's doing time for taking out that crazy old lady back in Texas. So how do we get rid of this creep before he causes any more trouble? Well, first off, what we're definitely not going to do is meet up with the blackmailer one-on-one. If they could actually prove anything and only want to see Maxine answer for her crimes, then they would have told the police already. Their shady tactics make it obvious that they have bad intentions, and at the same time, they clearly need Maxine to cooperate for some aspect of their plan. So why make it easy for them? Instead, the first thing that I would do is tell a trusted friend like her buddy Leon. She can fill him in on the details in case anything goes wrong, and he can even come to the meetup with her as a backup. He'll have to stay out of sight and not raise any suspicion from the blackmailer, but having a lookout will be a huge help if this guy tries anything else shady. Of course, carrying something for self-defense would also be a good idea, but we already know that Maxine keeps that thing on her wherever she goes, so she doesn't need any help when it comes to the blicky. Knowing the exact time and place of the meeting gives Maxine the option to flip the script on the stalker and turn it into a trap for him instead. What she needs to do is get some of her friends to wait for her outside of the hotel. Then, after hearing what the blackmailer has to say, they can jump him when he goes to leave and find out who he's really working for, or pull an Uno reverse and start tailing him instead. She can't tell the police for obvious reasons, but one thing that she could do is plant some illegal substances on the guy, and then call in an anonymous tip to get him arrested, which should at least get him out of her way for now. Figuring out the ID of the blackmailer could change everything, but they've been careful not to give us much evidence to work with yet. Still, based on what was on the tape and the fact that they knew where to find her, it's obvious that the stalker has known her personally for many years. So she should think back to anyone who might possibly have access to this information and start building a list of suspects from there. The 2 dead victims that were just found could be a good place to start, since they were both close friends of Maxine's, indicating that the killings and the blackmail could be connected. She obviously wouldn't be able to review the evidence herself, but I'd pay attention to the news once more details start to come out and see if there's anything that sticks out that might point us in the right direction. In the meantime, anyone who's close to Maxine, like Leon and her agent, should be on high alert in case the killer decides to target them next. This can actually work to their advantage if Leon was willing to use himself as live bait, since they might be able to lure the attacker out and catch them in the act. With no other choice, Maxine travels to the restaurant on the top floor of this swanky hotel, where she meets with the mystery man, who introduces himself as John Labatt, a private investigator. He won't reveal who hired him, but he knows the names of everyone who died at the farm, and he knows that she was the one who killed the older couple. Without admitting to anything, Maxine doubts that he has any proof, but he tells her that she might be surprised. She tries to pay him off, but he says that money isn't what they're after. Instead, he wants her to come to a party later that night, giving her an envelope with the address, and threatening to use his inside information to end her career if she doesn't play along. When Maxine gets back to her apartment, she's immediately confronted by the 2 detectives before she can get inside. They say that she's not in any trouble, but they're looking to chat about the 2 dead girls after learning that she knew both victims personally, and was one of the last people to see the 2 of them alive. The news hits her hard, but she quickly composes herself and chooses to stay quiet, slamming the door right in the detectives' faces. Upstairs, she watches through the window to make sure that they're gone before grabbing the tape and bringing it down to see Leon. Handing him the tape, she asks if there's any way to find out who recorded it. After looking it over, he unfortunately says that it's not possible, but he does notice that it's made by a rare brand, Quantity, saying that he can call around to find out who in the area is selling them. Thanking him, Maxine hurries to get back to the studio, with no idea that she'll never see him alive again. At the studio, she passes through a security gate, and the guard there already recognizes her from her other movies. Waiting in the backlot, she notices a group of protesters demonstrating against the film, but that's when the director Elizabeth picks her up for a chat. As they're driving through the sets, the director explains how she's been getting pushback for casting Maxine in the role, with the producers worried that she'll be too controversial. For her, she saw a realness in Maxine's acting that made her stand out, but she still isn't sure if she really has what it takes. Eventually, they arrive outside of the set of the Bates Motel from Psycho, but Maxine seems more interested in the old haunted house on the hill behind it. While Elizabeth is still talking to her, she stares up at the building, convinced that she can see the old woman watching her from the window, and completely ignoring everything the director is saying. Calling her out, the director snaps her out of it, and when she looks back, the old woman has already disappeared. But it's clear that the ghosts of Maxine's past are still haunting her. The director picks up on this and reminds her not to get distracted, warning her not to blow what might be her only chance at ever becoming a real star. While she's driving home, Maxine notices the private eye trailing her in traffic and decides that she's just about had enough. Throwing the car in park, she wraps her keys around her fingers and storms up to the car, smashing his camera on the street and proceeding to beat the absolute hell out of him before kicking off his side view mirror and speeding away. Okay, holy this guy is annoying. I know that beatdown felt good as hell, but Maxine needs to be careful here before she ends up catching another case. Instead of going full Wolverine on his ass in broad daylight, this is exactly why she should have hired a full-time security guard by now. That way, she could have somebody else take care of the guy without having to get her own hands dirty, since she's already in enough trouble as it is. As long as we're bringing other people into this, I'd also hire my own private investigator to stalk the stalker and turn this into a two-player game. I'm sure he wouldn't exactly like being on the receiving end of things for once, and digging up some dirt on him could help turn the tables. Or, how about this idea? Maxine pulls a Nathan for you and hires 10 other women who look just like her to start running around the city, throwing him off when he can't figure out which version of her to follow. Along the same lines of making herself harder to track, she should do anything that she can to change up her routine. For now, I'd rent a different car, start taking different routes to and from work, and even stay at different hotels or at a friend's place until she can finally shake this guy. Since the private eye is so focused on following her every move, she could try to swing this into luring him into a trap. By setting up a scenario where he has to do something illegal, like breaking and entering, she can get him arrested by the police and see how he likes trying to follow her around from inside of a cell. Of course, there's always the option to call in some help from her criminal contacts to get rid of him the old-fashioned way. I mean, she's taken people out for messing with her career before, so violence is definitely on the table here, but we'll come back to this idea a little later. Just like before, learning the blackmailer's real identity would change everything. And now she's got some new evidence that could help her figure it out. First off, she has the envelope with the exact address telling her where to find them. Knowing the meeting spot gives her the option to stake out the location and see if she can catch a glimpse of the blackmailer somewhere around the property. She can also look into the ownership history of the house and start to build out some connections from there. If she does go to the meeting, then I wouldn't go alone. Once again, I'd get as many friends together as I could and go for the Trojan horse approach. So Maxine would go to the meeting spot, gets the blackmailer to reveal himself, and then boom, her trunk opens up with 5 of her heavily armed friends to make him regret ever crossing this future Scream Queen. We also have 2 more pieces of physical evidence: the tape and the newspaper clipping. From the clipping, if we can find out what newspaper it came from, this could provide us with a lot of helpful information, like when it was printed and where it was sold, which could help us narrow down a list of potential suspects. As for the tape, Leon's plan to call around to local stores in the area is actually a great idea. Like he already mentioned, the brand of tape that was used, Quantity, are rare, higher quality tapes that are used in professional filmmaking. They make up only 5 to 10% of all the tapes that are out there and are only sold at specialty stores. On top of that, this one looks brand new, possibly indicating that it was purchased recently. The actual footage on the tape is a duplicate from evidence gathered by the Texas Sheriff's Department. To make a copy, the blackmailer would have needed to buy not only the tapes, but a playback VCR, and a recording VCR, and RCA cables to connect the 2 devices. Now that we have his grocery list, if we can call around and find a store that just sold all of these items to a particularly shady character, then we'll be one step closer to cracking the case. Before heading home, Maxine decides that she needs to talk to somebody about what's been going on, and the only person besides Leon who she can trust is her agent, Teddy. Rushing to his office, she finally confesses the full rundown of what happened at the farm. But Teddy here isn't as surprised as you might think. Taking it all in, he tells her to focus on her acting and let him handle everything else, saying that he'll do whatever it takes to make sure that she gets her big break. Back at her apartment, Maxine climbs into bed and starts reading through the script, but she's keeping the blicky on her nightstand just in case of any unwanted visitors. Meanwhile, downstairs, Leon is working late when a customer comes in asking for something that makes him upset. After showing him out, Leon decides to close up for the night, but he has no idea that he's not really alone. Behind him, the man dressed in black leather quietly grabs a hunting knife from the counter before sneaking up on him, and using it to slice the back of his neck open. But he's not done yet. He blocks one strike with his cast and tries to crawl away, but the man quickly catches up and digs the blade into his back. That makes 3 victims down, with 5 more to go. And as the man leaves, he takes off one of Leon's earrings as a trophy. Outside, he climbs into the back seat of the private investigator's car, and his assistant seems like he's getting more and more afraid of him the deeper into the plan that they get. In the morning, Maxine wakes up to a phone call from Teddy. He's been doing some research into the man who's been following her, but so far, it's turned up nothing but dead ends. While they're talking, she notices a bunch of cop cars and ambulances gathered outside and rushes downstairs to see what's happened. She's devastated to see that they're here for Leon, with the same demonic symbol carved into his forehead as they found on the last 2 victims. This time, the detectives are finally able to get her down to the station for questioning. Bringing her to the morgue, they show her the bodies of her 2 other friends, saying how all 3 killings must be related. They think that their suspect is setting things up to make the attacks look like the work of another serial killer, but they haven't made any progress in the investigation yet. And the one thing that all 3 victims have in common is that they all knew Maxine. Detective Torres tries to pressure her into spilling the beans before she ends up dead next, but Maxine still refuses to talk, telling them that she has to get to work as she storms out of the room. Williams chases behind her, begging Maxine just to tell them anything that might help save the next victim. But she responds that sometimes you can only save yourself. After leaving the station, Maxine finally gets back to the studio, where they're filming some flashback scenes with Molly, the main actress from the first film. The director tells them to spend some time together, intending for Maxine to pick up on a few tricks of the trade from someone with a little more experience. At her trailer, the girl explains that getting on Elizabeth's good side can make or break your entire career, telling Maxine to keep her head down and follow her instructions without asking any questions if she wants to make it. As they part ways, she mentions how she has to get ready for a party in the hills later that night, and Maxine leaves without realizing that the girl is walking straight into another trap. And that's when something stops her dead in her tracks. Standing in her path is her nemesis, the private investigator, and he reveals that he's carrying a revolver, telling Maxine to come with him quietly before she causes any more trouble. Okay, it looks like we've got ourselves an Old West standoff, and Labat here may not have as much power in this situation as he thinks. We already know that he isn't going to shoot her because his employer needs Maxine alive for whatever little plan that they have cooked up. She's about to make a break for it, which means that we're in for a good old-fashioned foot pursuit. And he made a big mistake by coming after our girl Maxine on her home turf. Once the chase begins, we just don't want to run down the open street where he can easily see us. From there, we can strategically escape through the sets in a way that makes it as difficult as possible for him to keep track of where we are. We need to use the complicated layout of the backlots to our advantage, by making sharp turns, doubling back, or changing elevation levels whenever we can. The sets are also full of environmental hazards that she can use to create obstacles like knocking over objects in his path as she runs by, or running through a doorway and then blocking it off with a heavy item to slow him down. Grabbing a weapon is always a good idea, and even if it's only something like a simple 2x4, she can still use it to knock him out by surprise if she sets up an ambush. Being on a film set also prepares us with some unique opportunities. For example, if she happens to run through the wardrobe department, she can quickly change her look by throwing on a costume or a wig to throw him off. Since the place is so spread out, the workers need to use all kinds of vehicles to get around. So I'd be looking for a golf cart or even a horse that I could use to make a quick escape. Remember, Maxine here is literally the movie star, and there are hundreds of people working here whose only goal is to make sure that the movie comes out. One option could be to quickly circle back to Molly's trailer and hide out there, where she can then call for more help from studio security. Her ultimate goal should be to get to where there's other crew members working and use them as meat shields to keep her safe. But with that being said, if this guy happened to have an unfortunate accident while chasing her, like falling down a flight of stairs or out of a window, that wouldn't necessarily be a bad thing for Maxine either. Backing away, Maxine does a 180 and takes off running up the street. Cutting through one of the sets, she ends up in a fake corner store where the front door is locked, giving Labat a chance to catch up. He tackles her into a bunch of piñatas, but she gets to her feet first and escapes through the side entrance. Maxine runs into another facade and out through the park in the front of a town hall, until she finally makes it into the haunted house set that's behind the motel. She hurries inside, but it's a dead end, leaving her with nowhere else to run. Knowing that he's got her, Labat draws his weapon and slowly approaches the door, but luckily, he's intercepted by a security guard just in time. Not wanting to cause a scene, the man plays it off like he just got lost and lets the guard lead him away, leaving Maxine with an opportunity to escape. As she's leaving the lot, the director calls her over, telling her to take the weekend off so she'll have plenty of rest for her first big day. Besides that, she wants her to take care of whatever's going on in her life at all costs, so that they can finish the production without any distractions, and Maxine says that's exactly what she plans to do. Back at her apartment, Maxine comes up with a plan to turn the tables on her stalkers. Calling her agent and her friend Shepard, she tells them to meet her at a particular club later that night. With everything in motion, she heads to the club and starts to blend in with the crowd. Sure enough, Labat shows up there looking for her, and she makes sure that he sees her before disappearing into the bathroom, all according to her plan. Thinking that he's got her cornered, Labat storms in and starts kicking open the stalls one after the other, shouting about what a badass he is the entire time. Finally, he gets to the last stall, fully expecting to find Maxine inside, only to realize that she's escaped through an open window. Running out the back door, he's suddenly blinded by a set of high beams when he reaches the loading dock. It's Maxine and her agent Teddy, and while he's focused on them, Shepard sneaks up from behind and clubs the man with a baseball bat, knocking him out cold. When Labat finally wakes up, he discovers that he's been handcuffed to the steering wheel of his own car. He sees Maxine standing nearby, and when she presses a button, he suddenly realizes that he's been placed into a junkyard car crusher, and it's slowly coming down on his head. Standing back, they watch as the machine brutally crushes the man to death, flattening him out like a pancake. That makes 4 down with 4 more to go, and Teddy tells her to get cleaned up while they take care of the rest, sending Shepard's Dobermans to lick up his blood off the ground. Back at home, Maxine hits the showers to clean herself up, but she can't shake the feeling that this fight isn't really over. Turning on the news, she sees a report about how the serial killer has claimed another victim. And this reminds her of the conversation that she had with Detective Williams back at the station. Realizing that she needs to do something, she goes to the trash can and digs out the envelope that Labat gave her, suddenly putting the pieces together that all of her friends said they were heading to a party in the hills before they went missing. Rushing out to her car, she decides that she's going to investigate the address for herself, but what she doesn't realize is that the detectives are also right behind her. Okay, now that's what we like to see. The car crusher has got to be one of the most gangster ways to take somebody out. And if one thing's for sure, it's the best decision Maxine here ever made was calling in some help from our boy Gus Fring. You know who didn't make good decisions? I'll give you 2 hints. His name rhymes with La Splat, and he just got about 5.5 feet shorter. That's right, Inspector Asshole. You, sir, have f***ed up. As a private eye, it's literally your job to know everything about your target. I guess you somehow missed the fact that Maxine here was definitely not the one to play with. That whole incident at the farm that you kept bringing up, 7 people ended up dead, but Maxine walked away as the only survivor. Did you think that this was some kind of accident? This woman is so determined to be a movie star that she already survived a Texas Chainsaw Massacre level event in real life. And you thought that she'd be intimidated by your sorry old toothpick-chewing, fedora hat-wearing ass. Seriously? Get real, man. The only reason why you even survived for this long is because killing you wasn't worth the trouble yet. Now, I don't know how these investigations usually go, but I'm pretty sure real detectives don't just announce, "Here I am," and then proceed to follow her every move from approximately 5 feet away. Maybe if you'd kept a lower profile, then it would have been harder for her to figure out who she needed to kill. But you were over here practically daring her to try something every chance that you got. And what do you know? She finally did something about it. Wow, it's almost like our actions have consequences. Sorry, dude, but have fun being the only Autobot in hell, because Inspector Labat, you have seriously f***ed up. The address leads her to a remote property way up in the hills. Parking her car, she has to take a gondola ride to get to the house itself, with the detectives watching her every move to see where she's going. Arriving at the top, she steps out into the empty front yard with no sign of anyone else being there. The front door is unlocked, so she carefully sneaks inside, making her way past piles of recording equipment. Just then, she hears a noise from somewhere upstairs and slowly creeps up the spiral staircase, until she finds herself in front of a large green door. From the other side, she can hear a tape playing of herself as a young girl, in a video that she recorded with her father many years before she disappeared. Pushing it open, she finds a man sitting in front of a makeup mirror. And that's when she finally learns that the blackmailer has been her father Ernest all along. The man is thrilled to have finally tracked her down, but Maxine herself is too stunned to move, as he calmly reaches down and takes the weapon right out of her hands. This time, he's the one who's making a movie, and it's meant to show how the dreams of being a Hollywood star corrupted his once innocent little daughter. And he's going to use her story to prove his point. Speechless, Maxine backs away until she's standing at the top of the stairs, and ends up knocking over a suitcase that's filled with the cut-up body parts of the actress Molly, making 5 victims down with 3 more to go. In fact, she's so terrified by the sight that she doesn't notice her father slipping a plastic bag over her head before it's too late, causing her to slowly black out. Okay, well, how's that for one f***ed-up family reunion? I guess we finally get to meet the old man, and he's just as creepy as I always feared. But I gotta say, Maxine didn't do herself any favors on this one. Getting tricked into a trap is one thing, but walking right into one when you already know it's a trap is a completely different story. Besides saving Molly, there was absolutely no need for Maxine to rush into this alone. She had the guy's exact address, so why not call in some backup to help her out at least? We bring in the heavy artillery to take care of Labat, then we decide to go in by ourselves to face the head bad guy? That's just a bad strategy on her part. Seeing the old man for the first time in however many years definitely came as a shock, but that shock should have worn off right the exact millisecond when he was shoving a plastic bag over the top of her head. If this ever happens to you, then the first thing that you need to do is tear a hole in the bag using your fingernails or teeth, allowing more oxygen to get inside. Once you've saved yourself from suffocating, then we can focus on our attacker, hitting him with kicks, elbows, and headbutts until he finally loses his grip and you're able to escape. Unfortunately for Maxine, she didn't react quickly enough, and now we'll have to see what kind of situation she's in when she eventually wakes up. Sometime later, Maxine wakes up to find that she's been blindfolded and tied to a palm tree in front of the house's pool, with studio lights and movie cameras all focused on her at the center of the scene. That's when her father slowly walks into the crowd and makes his way up to the platform where Maxine is standing. Taking off her blindfold, she explains that her friends needed to be punished for their sins. As for Maxine, he's going to make an example out of her by performing an exorcism live on camera, driving out the evil spirits that have been corrupting her since she started her career in Hollywood. Turning on the camera, he begins to recite from the Bible, declaring that everyone in the movie business is actually working as a servant of the devil. With Maxine powerless to fight back, he orders her to confess her sins and let her spirit be free. Otherwise, she'll be branded with the same smearing hot iron that he used on all of her friends. Furious, he inches the iron closer and closer to her head, when all of a sudden, Detective Torres busts out of the shadows, ordering everyone to freeze. Instead, one of the men pulls a sawed-off shotgun out of his robe, but he's immediately shot by Detective Williams and tumbles forward into the pool. The others all put their hands up, but the preacher refuses to surrender, firing them all up to the fight to the death. Suddenly, all hell breaks loose as the situation escalates into a full-blown gunfight. The preacher takes one to the shoulder, causing him to drop the iron and setting his robe on fire, but he drops down into the water to extinguish the flames. The detectives take cover behind a low stone wall, dropping as many of the cultists as they can while the preacher escapes deeper into the property. Maxine is still caught in the crossfire, but that's when she remembers that she has a switchblade in her pocket, managing to cut herself free as the bullets ricochet all around her. Before she can get far, she's dragged down beneath the water by one of the injured cultists, but she fights him off and stabs him up through the nose with her knife, killing him instantly. With most of the cultists down, the detectives go to chase after the preacher, telling Maxine to wait for backup, but she isn't about to sit this one out, and grabs the sawed-off before chasing them up the hill towards the Hollywood sign. By the time that she makes it to the top of the hill, Maxine can already hear the sounds of a violent battle popping off not much farther up ahead, where she finds Detective Williams treating her partner's wounds. The man's been badly injured, and now that Maxine is here, Williams tells her to look after him while she goes to track down her father. She tries her best to keep him alive, but by now it's already too late, and the detective gasps for air as he dies of his injuries. Just then, she hears gunfire from somewhere in the distance. Running towards the source of the noise, she almost crashes into Detective Williams, who tumbles down the hillside. That makes 7 victims down, but now it's time for Maxine to finally confront her father. Up ahead, she finds her father lying on his back in the dirt. He's been shot by the detective and is on his way out, but not before he and his daughter get to have a few words. Through the blood in his mouth, he curses her for turning out the way that she did. A helicopter appears in the sky overhead, shining down its spotlight and telling Maxine to drop the weapon. But she's not done yet. As her father reaches out to her, she repeats the mantra that he taught her when she was a little girl. "I will not accept a life I do not deserve," before coldly raising her weapon and blowing his head apart like a watermelon, finally ending things once and for all. In the aftermath, the serial killer who's been terrorizing the city is finally caught, and Maxine gets to live out her dreams of becoming a certified Hollywood movie star. In a red carpet interview, she tells her viewers that they can do it too as long as they never give up on their goals, spinning the entire situation into a boost for her career. 1 month after the incident, production on the film begins again, with Maxine officially being recognized as the undisputed star of the show. Gathering everyone together, the director calls for a moment of silence in memory of the actress who was killed, but the show must go on. While everyone gets back to work, Maxine takes a look at the prop of her decapitated head for the end of the movie, saying how she never wants all of this to end. It's been a long journey to the top, but if she's learned one thing, it's that when people say the movie industry is cutthroat, they aren't joking around. The X trilogy. Wow. X, Pearl, Maxine. Pretty solid movies into the overall horror movie ethos, I have to say. I don't really know about the ending of this movie, but at least it's not Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Part 3. Let us know down in the comments what you would have done differently. Thank you so much for watching. Leave a like and subscribe, and check out that How to Beat playlist for more videos just like this one. I'm the guy. I'll see you in the next video, and have a damn good day.